Hi, everybody. Welcome to First Chapter Friday. I am Miss Frank, and today I will be reading Warbringer, the Wonder Woman story by Leigh Bardugo. This is actually part of the DC Icon series, and if you like this and you want to read this, there are other ones. We have Catwoman and Batman at our local library. So now, without further ado, Chapter 1. You do not enter a race to lose. Diana bounced lightly on her toes as the starting line, her calves taut as bowstrings, her mother's words reverberating in her ears. A noisy crowd had gathered for the wrestling matches and javelin throws that would mark the start of the Nemesian Games. But the real event was the foot race. And now the stands were buzzing with word that the Queen's daughter had entered the competition. When Hippolyta had seen Diana amid the runners clustered on the arena stands, she displayed no surprise. As was tradition, she descended from her viewing platform to wish the athletes luck in their endeavors, sharing a joke here, offering a kind word of encouragement there. She had nodded briefly to Diana, showing her no special favor, but she'd whispered so low that only her daughter could hear, "You do not enter a race to lose." Amazons lined the path that led out of the arena, already stamping their feet and chanting for the games to begin. On Diana's right, Ronnie flashed her a radiant smile. "Good luck today." She was always kind, always gracious, and of course, always victorious. To Diana's left, Thura snorted and shook her head. "She's going to need it." Diana ignored her. She'd been looking forward to this race for weeks, a trek across the island to retrieve one of the red flags hung beneath the great dome in Bonamadal. In a flat-out sprint, she didn't have a chance. She still hadn't come into the fullness of her Amazon strength. "You will in time," her mother had promised. But her mother promised a lot of things. This race was different. It required strategy, and Diana was ready. She'd been training in secret, running sprints with Maeve and plotting a route that had rougher terrain, but was definitely a straighter shot to the western tip of the island. She'd even, well, she hadn't exactly spied. She'd gathered intelligence on the other Amazons in the race. She was still the smallest and, of course, the youngest, but she'd shot up in the last year, and she was nearly as tall as Thura now. "I don't need luck," she told herself. "I have a plan." She glanced down the row of Amazons gathered at the starting line like troops readying for war and amended, but a little luck wouldn't hurt either. She wanted that laurel crown. It was better than any royal circlet or tiara, an honor that couldn't be given, that had to be earned. She found Maeve's red hair and freckled face in the crowd and grinned, trying to project confidence. Maeve returned to the smile and gestured with both hands as if she were tamping down the air. She mouthed the words, "Steady on." Diana rolled her eyes but nodded and tried to slow her breathing. She had a bit of habit of coming out too fast and wasting her speed too early. Now she cleared her mind and forced herself to concentrate on the course as Tecmessa walked the line, surveying the runners, jewels glinting in her thick corona of curls, silver bands flashing on her brown arms. She was Hippolyta's closest adviser, second in rank only to the queen, and she carried herself as if her belted indigo shift were battle armor. "Take it easy, Pixis," Tech murmured to Diana as she passed. "Wouldn't want to see you crack." Diana heard Thura snort again, but she refused to flinch at the nickname. "You won't be smirking when I'm on the victor's podium," she promised. Tech raised her hands for silence and bowed to Hippolyta, who sat between two other members of the Amazon Council in the Royal Loge. A high platform, shaded by a silken overhang dyed in the vibrant red and blue of the Queen's colors. Diana knew that was where her mother wanted her right now, seated beside her, waiting for the start of the games, instead of competing. None of that would matter when she won. Hippolyta dipped her chin the barest amount, elegant in her white tunic and riding trousers, a simple circlet resting against her forehead. She looked relaxed, at her ease, as if she might decide to leap down and join the competition at any time, but still every inch the queen. Tech addressed the athletes gathered on the arena sands. "In whose honor do you compete?" "For the glory of the Amazons," they replied in unison. "For the glory of our queen." Diana felt her heart beat harder. She'd never said the words before, not as a competitor. "To whom do we give praise each day?" Tech trumpeted. "Hera," they chorused. "Athena, Demeter, Hestia, Aphrodite, Artemis," the goddess who had created the mascara and gifted it to Hippolyta as a place of refuge. Tech paused, and along the line, Diana heard whispers of other names: Oya, Durga, Freya, Mary, Yael. Names once cried out in death, the last prayers of female warriors fallen in battle. The words that had brought them to this island and given them new life as Amazons. Beside Diana, Ronnie murmured the names of the demon-fighting Matri, the seven mothers, and pressed the rectangular amulet she always wore to her lips. Tech raised a blood-red flag, identical to those that would be waiting for the runners in Bana Midal. May the island guide you to your just victory, she shouted. She dropped the red silk. The crowd roared. The runners surged towards the eastern arch. Like that, the race had begun. Diana and Maeve had anticipated a bottleneck, but Diana still felt a pang of frustration as runners clogged the stone throat of the tunnel. A tangle of white tunics and muscled limbs, footsteps echoing off the stone, all of them trying to get clear of the arena at once. Then they were on the road, sprinting across the island, each runner choosing her own course. You do not enter a race to lose. Diana set her pace to the rhythm of those words, bare feet slapping the packed earth of the road that would lead her through the tangle of the Sibyllian woods to the island's northern coast. Ordinarily, a miles-long trek through this forest would be a slow one, hampered by fallen trees and tangles of vines so thick they had to be hacked through with a blade you didn't mind dulling. But Diana had plotted her way well. An hour after she entered the woods, she burst from the trees onto the deserted coast road. The wind lifted her hair and salt spray lashed her face. She breathed deep, checked the position of the sun. She was going to win, not just place, but win. She'd mapped out the course the week before with Maeve, and they'd run it twice in secret in the gray light hours of early morning, when their sisters were first rising from their beds, when the kitchen fires were still being kindled, and the only curious eyes they'd had to worry about belonged to anyone up early to hunt game or cast nets for the day's catch. But hunters kept to the woods and meadows farther south, and no one fished off this part of the coast. There was no good place to launch a boat, just the steep, steel-colored cliffs plunging straight down to the sea, and a tiny, unwelcoming cove that could only be reached by a path so narrow you had to shuffle down sideways, back pressed to the rock. The northern shore was gray, grim, and inhospitable, and Diana knew every inch of its secret landscape, its crags and caves, its tide pools teeming with limpets and anemones. It was a good place to be alone. The island seeks to please, her mother had told her. It was why Themyscira was forested by redwoods in some places and rubber trees in others. Why you could spend an afternoon roaming the grasslands on a scoop-necked pony and the evening atop a camel, scaling a moonlit dragonback of sand dunes. They were all pieces of the lives the Amazons had led before they came to the island, but landscapes of the heart. Diana sometimes wondered if Themyscira had called the northern coast into being just for her, so that she could challenge herself climbing on the sheer drops of its cliffs, so that she could have a place to herself when the weight of being Hippolyta's daughter got to be too much. You do not enter a race to lose. Her mother had not been issuing a general warning. Diana's losses meant something different, and they both knew it. And not only because she was a princess. Diana could almost feel Tech's knowing gaze on her, hearing the mocking in her voice. Take it easy, Pixis. That was the nickname Tech had given her, Pixis. A little clay pot made to store jewels or a tincture of carmine for pinking the lips. The name was harmless, meant to tease, always said in love, or so Tech claimed. But it stung every time. A reminder that Diana was not like the other Amazons and would never be. Her sisters were battle-proven warriors, steel-forged, from suffering and owned to greatness as they passed from life to immortality. All of them had earned their place on Themyscira, all but Diana, born of the island's soil and Hippolyta's longing for a child, fashioned from clay by her mother's hands, hollow and breakable. Take it easy, Pixis. Wouldn't want to see you crack. Diana steadied her breathing, even kept her pace. Not today, Tech. This day the laurel belongs to me. She spared the briefest glance at the horizon, letting the sea breeze cool the sweat on her brow. Through the mists, she glimpsed the white shape of a ship. It had come close enough to the boundary that Diana could make out its sails. The craft was small, a schooner maybe? She had trouble remembering nautical details. Mainmast, mizzenmast, 1,000 names for sails, and knots for rigging. It was one thing to be out on a boat, learning from Tueta, who had sailed with Illyrian pirates, but quite another to be stuck in the library at the Physium, staring glazed-eyed at diagrams of Brigantine or Caraval. Sometimes Diana and Maeve made a game of trying to spot ships or planes, and once they'd even seen the fat blot of a cruise ship on the horizon. But most mortals knew to steer clear of their particular corner of the Aegean, where compasses spun and instruments suddenly refused to obey. Today it looked like a storm was picking up past the mists of the boundary, and Diana was sorry she couldn't stop to watch it. The rains that came to Themyscira were tediously gentle and predictable, nothing like the threatening rumble of thunder, the shimmer of a far-off lightning strike. "You ever miss storms?" Diana had asked one afternoon as she and Maeve lazed on the palace's sun-soaked rooftop terrace, listening to the distant roar and clatter of a tempest. Maeve had died in the crossberry ambush, the last words on her lips a prayer to Saint Brigid of Kildare. She was new to the island by Amazon standards and came from Cork, where storms were common. "No," Maeve had said in her lilting voice. "I miss a good cup of tea. Dancing, boys, definitely not rain." "We dance," Diana protested. Maeve just listened. "You dance differently when you know you won't live forever." And then she'd stretched, freckles like dense clouds of pollen on her white skin. "I think I was a cat in another life, because all I want is to lie around sleeping in the world's biggest sunbeam." "Steady on." Diana resisted the urge to speed forward. It was hard to remember to keep something in reserve when the early morning sun on her shoulders and the wind at her back. She felt strong, but it was easy to feel strong when she was on her own. A boom sounded over the waves, a hard metallic clap, like a door slamming shut. Diana's steps faltered. On the blue horizon, a billowing column of smoke rose, flames licking at its base. The schooner was on fire, its prow blown to splinters, and one of its masts smashed, the sail dragging over the rails. Diana found herself slowing, but forced her stride back on pace. There was nothing she could do for the schooner. Planes crashed. Ships were wrecked upon the rocks. That was the nature of the mortal world. It was a place where disaster could happen and often did. Human life was a tide of misery, one that never reached the island shores. Diana focused her eyes on the path. Far, far ahead, she could see the sunlight gleaming gold off the great dome at Bonamidal. First the red flag, then the laurel crown. That was the plan. From somewhere on the wind, she heard a cry. A gull, she told herself. A girl, some other voice within her insisted. Impossible. A human shout couldn't carry over such a great distance. But it didn't matter. There was nothing she could do. And yet her eyes strayed back to the horizon. "I just want to get a better view," she told herself. "I have plenty of time. I'm ahead." There was no good reason to leave the ruts of the old cart track, no logic to veering out over the rocky point, but she did it anyway. The waters near the shore were calm, clear, vibrant turquoise. The ocean beyond was something else, wild, deep, blue, a sea gone almost black. The island might seek to please her and her sisters, but the world beyond the boundary didn't concern itself with the happiness or safety of its inhabitants. Even from a distance, she could tell the schooner was sinking. But she saw no lifeboats, no distress flares, only pieces of the broken craft carried along by rolling waves. It was done. Diana rubbed her hands briskly over her arms, dispelling a sudden chill, and started making her way back to the cart track. That was the way of human life. She and Maeve had dived out by the boundary many times, swum the wrecks of airplanes and clipper ships and sleek motorboats. The salt water changed the wood, hardened it, so it did not rot. Mortals were not the same. They were food for deep sea fishes, for sharks, and for time that ate at them slowly, inevitably, whether they were on water or on land. Diana checked the sun's position again. She could be at Bonamidal in 40 minutes, maybe less. She told her legs to move. She'd only lost a few moments, maybe less. She told her legs to move. She could make up the time. She'd instead looked over her shoulder. There were stories in all the old books about women who made the mistake of looking back. On the way out of burning cities, on the way out of hell, but Diana still turned her eyes to that ship sinking in the great waves, tilting like a bird's broken wing. She measured the length of the cliff's top. There were jagged rocks at the base. If she didn't leap with enough momentum, the impact would be ugly. Still, the fall wouldn't kill her. That's true of a real Amazon, she thought, but is it true of you? Well, she hoped the fall wouldn't kill her. Of course, if the fall didn't kill her, her mother would. She measured the length of the cliff top. There were jagged rocks at the base. If she didn't leap with enough momentum, I'm going to edit this and cut this out. Diana looked once more at the wreck and pushed off, running full out, arms pumping, stride long, picking up speed, closing the distance to the cliff's edge. Stop, 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 her mind clamored. This is madness. Even if there were survivors, she could do nothing for them. To try to save them was to court exile, and there would be no exception to the rule, not even for a princess. Stop. She wasn't sure why she didn't obey. She wanted to believe it was because a hero's heart beat in her chest and demanded she answer that frightened call. But even as she launched herself off the cliff and into the empty sky, she knew part of what drew her on was the challenge of that great gray sea that did not care if she loved it. Her body cut a smooth arc through the air, arms pointing like a compass needle directing her course. She plummeted toward the water and broke the surface in a clean plunge, ears full of sudden silence, muscles tensed for the brutal impact of the rocks. None came. She shot upward, drew in a breath, and swam straight for the boundary, arms slicing through the warm water. There was always a little thrill when she neared the boundary, when the temperature of the water began to change, the cold touching her fingertips first, then settling over her scalp and shoulders. Diana and Maeve liked to swim out from the southern beaches, daring themselves to go farther and farther. Once they glimpsed a ship passing in the mist. Sailors standing at the stern. One of the men had lifted an arm pointing in their direction. They plunged to safety, gesturing wildly to each other beneath the waves, laughing so hard that by the time they reached the shore, they were both choking on salt water. We could be sirens, Maeve had shrieked as they flopped into the warm sand, except neither of them could carry a tune. They'd spent the rest of the afternoon singing violently off-key Irish drinking songs and laughing themselves silly until Tech had found them. Then they'd shut up quick. Breaking the boundary was a minor infraction. Being seen by mortals anywhere near the island was cause for serious disciplinary action. And what was Diana doing now? Stop. But she couldn't. Not when that high human cry still rang in her ears. Diana felt the cold water beyond the boundary engulf her fully. The sea had her now, and it was not friendly. The current seized her legs, dragging her down. A massive rolling force, the barest shrug of a god. You have to fight it, she realized, demanding that her muscles correct her course. She'd never had to work against the ocean. She bobbed for a moment on the surface, trying to get her bearings as the wave crested around her. The water was full of debris, shards of wood, broken fiberglass, orange life jackets that the crew must not have had time to don. It was nearly impossible to see through the falling rain and the mists that shrouded the island. What am I doing out here? She asked herself. Ships come and go. Human lives are lost. She dove again, peered through the rushing gray waters, but saw no one. Diana surfaced, but her own stupidity carving a growing ache in her gut. She'd sacrificed the race. This was supposed to be the moment. Her sisters saw her truly, the chance to make her mother proud. Instead, she'd thrown away her lead. And for what? There was nothing here but destruction. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw a flash of white, a big chunk of what might have been the ship's hull. It rose on a wave, vanished, rose again, and as it did, Diana glimpsed a slender brown arm, holding tight to the side, fingers spread, knuckles bent, and then it was gone. Another wave rose, a great gray mountain. Diana dove beneath it, kicking hard, then surfaced, searching for bits of lumber and fiberglass everywhere. Impossible to sort one piece of flotsam from another. There it was again, an arm, two arms, a body, bowed head and hunched shoulders, lemon-colored shirt, a tangle of dark hair, a girl. She lifted her head, gasped for breath, dark eyes, wild with fear. A wave crashed over her in a spray of white water. The chunk of hull surfaced. The girl was gone. Down again. Diana aimed for the place she'd seen the girl go under. She glimpsed a flash of yellow and lunged for it, seizing the fabric and using it to reel her in. A ghost's face loomed out at her from the cloudy water. Golden hair, blue eyes, wide and lifeless. She'd never seen a corpse up close before. She'd never seen a boy up close before. She recoiled, hand releasing his shirt. But even as she watched him disappear, she marked the difference. Hard jaw, broad brow, just like the pictures in the books. She resurfaced, but she lost all sense of direction now. The waves, the wreck, the bare shadow of the island in the mists. If she drifted out much further, she might not be able to find her way back. Diana could not stop seeing the image of that slender arm, the ferocity in those fingers, clinging hard to life. Once more, she told herself. She dove, the chill of the water, fastening tight around her bones now, burrowing deeper. One moment the world was gray current and cloudy sea, and the next the girl was there in her lemon-colored shirt, face down, arms and legs outstretched like a star. Her eyes were closed. Diana grabbed her around the waist and launched toward the surface. For a terrifying second, she could not find the shape of the island. And then the mist parted. She kicked forward, wrapping the girl awkwardly against her chest with one arm, fingers questing for a pulse with the other. There, beneath the jaw. Thready, indistinct, but there. Though the girl wasn't breathing, her heart still beat. Diana hesitated. She could see the outlines of Philos and Ekthros, the rocks that marked the rough beginnings of the boundary. The rules were clear. You could not stop the mortal tide of life and death. The island must never be touched by it. There were no exceptions. No human could be brought to Themyscira, even if it meant saving a life. Breaking that rule meant only one thing: exile. Exile. The word was a stone, unwanted ballast, the weight unbearable. It was one thing to breach the boundary, but what she did next might untether her from the island, her sisters, her mother, forever. The world seemed too large, the sea too deep. Let go. It was that simple. Let this girl slip from her grasp, and it would be as if Diana had never leapt from those cliffs. She would be light again, free of this burden. Diana thought of the girl's hand, the ferocious grip of her knuckles, the steel blade determination in her eyes before the wave took her under. She felt the ragged rhythm of the girl's pulse, a distant drum, the sound of an army marching, one that had fought well but could not fight on much longer. She swam for shore. As she passed through the boundary, with the girl clutched her, the mist dissolved and the rain abated. Warmth flooded her body. The calm water felt oddly lifeless after the thrashing of the sea, but Diana wasn't about to complain. When her feet touched the sandy bottom, she shoved up, shifting her grip to carry the girl from the shallows. She was eerily light, almost insubstantial. It was like holding a sparrow's body between her cupped hands. No wonder the sea had made such easy sport of this creature and her crewmates. She felt temporary, an artist's cast of a body rendered in plaster. Diana laid her gently on the sand and checked her pulse again. No heartbeat now. She knew she needed to get the girl's heart going, get the water out of her lungs. But her memory on just how to do that was a bit hazy. Diana had studied the basics of reviving a drowning victim, but she hadn't ever put it to practice outside the classroom. It was also possible she hadn't paid close attention at the time. How likely was it that an Amazon was going to drown, especially in the calm waters off Themyscira? And now her daydreaming might cost this girl her life. Do something, she told herself, trying to think past her panic. Why did you drag her out of the water if you're only going to sit staring at her like a frightened rabbit? Diana placed two fingers on the girl's sternum, then tracked and traced lower to what she'd hoped was the right spot. She locked her hands together and pressed. The girl's bones bent beneath her palms. Hurriedly, Diana drew back. What was this girl made of, anyway? Balsa wood? She felt about as solid as the little models of wood monuments that Diana had been forced to build for class. Gently, she pressed down again, then again. She shut the girl's nose with her fingers, closed her mouth over cooling mortal lips, and breathed. The gust drove into the girl's chest, and Diana saw it rise. But this time, the extra force seemed to be a good thing. Suddenly, the girl was coughing, her body convulsing as she spat up salt water. Diana sat back on her knees and released a short laugh. She'd done it. The girl was alive. The reality of what she'd just dared struck her, all the hounds of Hades. She'd done it. The girl was alive and trying to sit up. Here, Diana said, bracing the girl's back with her arm. She couldn't simply kneel there, watching her flop around on the sand like a fish. And it wasn't as if she could put her back in the ocean, could she? No, mortals were clearly too good at drowning. The girl clutched her chest, taking huge, sputtering gulps of air. The others, she gasped. Her eyes were so wide, Diana could see white ringing her irises all the way around. She was trembling, but Diana wasn't sure if it was because she was cold or going into shock. We have to help them. Diana shook her head. If there had been any other signs of life in the wreck, she hadn't seen them. Besides, time passed more quickly in the mortal world. Even if she swam back out, the storm would have long since had its way with any bodies or debris. They're gone. said Diana, then wished she'd chosen her words more carefully. The girl's mouth opened, closed. Her body was shaking so hard Diana thought it might break apart. That couldn't actually happen, could it? Diana scanned the cliffs above the beach. Someone might have seen her swim out. She felt confident no other runner had chosen this course, but anyone could have seen the explosion and come to investigate. I need to get you off the beach. Can you walk? The girl nodded, but her teeth were chattering, and she made no move to stand. Diana's eyes scoured the cliffs again. Seriously, I need you to get up. I'm trying. She didn't look like she was trying. Diana searched her memory for everything she'd been told about mortals, the soft stuff, eating habits, body temperature, cultural norms. Unfortunately, her mother and her tutors were more focused on what Diana referred to as the dire warnings: war, torture, genocide, pollution, bad grammar. The girl shivering before her on the sand didn't seem to qualify for inclusion in the dire warnings category. She looked about the same age as Diana, brown skinned, her hair a tangle of long, tiny braids covered in sand. She was clearly too weak to hurt anyone but herself. Even so, she could be plenty dangerous to Diana. Exile dangerous. Banished forever dangerous. Better not to think about that. Instead, she thought back to her classes with Tuetta. Make a plan. Battles are often lost because people don't know which war they're fighting. All right, this girl couldn't walk any great distance in her condition. Maybe that was a good thing, given that Diana had nowhere to take her. She rested what she hoped was a comforting hand on the girl's shoulder. Listen, I know you're feeling weak, but we should try to get off the beach. Why? Diana hesitated, then opted for an answer that was technically true, if not wholly accurate. High tide. It seemed to do the trick because the girl nodded. Diana stood up and offered her a hand. I'm fine, the girl said, shoving to her knees and then pushing up to her feet. You're stubborn, Diana said, with some measure of respect. The girl had almost drowned and seemed to be about as solid as driftwood and down, but she wasn't eager to accept help, and she definitely wasn't going to like what Diana suggested next. I need you to climb on my back. A crease appeared between the girl's brows. Why? Because I don't think you can make it up the cliffs. Is there a path? No, said Diana. That was definitely a lie. Instead of arguing, Diana turned her back. A minute later, she felt a pair of arms around her neck. The girl hopped on, and Diana reached back to take hold of her thighs and hitch her into position. Hold on tight. The girl's arms clamped around her windpipe. Not that tight, Diana choked out. Sorry. She loosened her hold. Diana took off at a jog. The girl groaned. Slow down. I think I'm going to vomit. Vomit? Diana scanned her knowledge of mortal bodily functions and immediately smoothed her gait. Do not do that. Just don't drop me. You weigh about as much as a heavy pair of boots. Diana picked her way through the big boulders wedged against the base of the cliff. I need my arms to climb, so you're going to have to hold on with your legs too. Climb the cliff. You're taking me up the side of this cliff? Are you out of your mind? Just hold on and try not to strangle me. Diana dug her fingers around the rock and started putting distance between them and the ground before the girl could think too much more about it. She moved quickly. This was familiar territory. Diana had scaled these cliffs countless times since she started visiting the North Shore, and when she was 12, she discovered the cave where they were headed. There were other caves lower on the cliff face, but they filled when the tide came in. Besides, they were too easy to crawl out of if someone got curious. The girl groaned again. Almost there, Diana said encouragingly. I'm not opening my eyes. Probably for the best. Just don't, you know, puke all over you. Yes, said Diana. That. Amazons didn't get sick, but vomiting appeared in any number of novels and featured in a particularly vivid description from her anatomy book. Blessedly, there were no illustrations. At last, Diana hauled them up into the divot in the rock that marked the cave's entrance. The girl rolled off and heaved a long breath. The cave was tall, narrow, and surprisingly deep, as if someone had taken a cleaver to the center of the cliff. Its gleaming black rock sides were perpetually damp with sea spray. When she was younger, Diana had liked to pretend that if she kept walking, the cave would lead straight through the cliff and open onto some other land entirely. It didn't. It was just a cave, and remains a cave no matter how hard she wished. Diana waited for her eyes to adjust, then shuffled farther inside. The old horse blanket was still there, wrapped in oilcloth and mostly dry, if a bit musty, as well as her tin box of supplies. She wrapped the blanket around the girl's shoulders. We aren't going to the top? Asked the girl. Not yet. Diana had to get back to the arena. The race must be close to over by now, and she didn't want people wondering where she'd gotten to. Are you hungry? The girl shook her head. We need to call the police, search and rescue. That is impossible. I don't know what happened, the girl said, starting to shake again. Jasmine and Ray were arguing with Dr. Ellis, and then there was an explosion. I saw it from the shore. It's my fault, the girl said as tears spilled over her cheeks. They're dead and it's my fault. Don't, Diana said gently, feeling a surge of panic. It was the storm. She laid her hand on the girl's shoulder. What's your name? Aaliyah, the girl said, burying her head in her arms. Aaliyah, I need to go, but no, Aaliyah said sharply. Don't leave me here. I have to. I need to get help. What Diana needed was to get back to Ephesus and figure out how to get this girl off the island before anyone else found out about her. Aaliyah grabbed hold of her arm, and again, Diana remembered the way she'd clung to that piece of hull. Please, Aaliyah said, hurry. Maybe they can send a helicopter. There could be survivors. I'll be back as soon as I can, Diana promised. She slid the tin box toward the girl. There are dried peaches and pili seeds and a little fresh water inside. Don't drink it all at once. Aaliyah's eyes stuttered. All at once? How long will you be gone? Maybe a few hours. I'll be back as fast as I can. Just stay warm and rest. Diana rose. And don't leave the cave. Aaliyah looked up at her. Her eyes were deep brown and heavily lashed, her gaze fearful but steady. For the first time since Diana had pulled her from the water, Aaliyah seemed to be truly seeing her. Where are we? She asked. What is this place? Diana wasn't sure how to answer, so all she said was, This is my home. She hooked her hands back into the rock and ducked out of the cave before Aaliyah could ask anything else. So that is chapter 1 of Wonder Woman Warbringer by Leigh Bardugo. I hope you guys thought that was interesting. And again, you can check this out at the library or ask your teachers. This one happens along to Miss Ferrante. And have a happy Friday. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. Bye.